Hello everybody, Jeremy Dickinson here. Thank you all for watching. In this video, what I'd like to do is talk about Maria Alvarez's 2009 essay, which I have here in my hand, Actions, Thought Experiments, and the Principle of Alternate Possibilities. One more time, Actions, Thought Experiments, and the Principle of Alternate Possibilities. A big picture, what Alvarez is doing in this paper is challenging Harry Frankfurt's efforts to refute the principle of alternate possibilities. Alvarez, big picture again, argues that Frankfurt's efforts fail. So, what I want to do in this first part of my video series on Alvarez's 2009 piece is do some important conceptual work. I want to define the principle of alternate possibilities so we're clear on it. Then I want to look at a passage where Alvarez explains what she means or understands by the principle of alternate possibilities. And then after that, what I want to do is explain, for those of you who may not know, or for those of you who need a recap, Frankfurt's argument against the principle of alternate possibilities. Then the stage will be set for looking at how exactly Alvarez responds to Frankfurt. So that latter project, the project of looking at how exactly Alvarez responds to Frankfurt, will take place in part 2 of my video series on Alvarez's 2009 paper. So this is part 1. Let's get to work. So we have the principle of alternate possibilities, which is the key principle that's in question in Alvarez's paper. And let's just think about the principle generally before we get to her interpretation of it. A very general understanding of it, the way Frankfurt understood it, is in the following way. An agent is morally responsible for performing an action only if she could have done otherwise. Okay, an agent is morally responsible for performing an action only if she could have done otherwise. So let's just take a couple examples. Let's take a negative example and then a positive one. In the positive case, so suppose Sarah, she donates to charity. She does something that we consider good. We would say that all things being equal, she's morally responsible, she's morally praiseworthy for having given to charity. According to the principle of alternate possibilities, though, there's a necessary condition that has to be satisfied in order for Sarah to be considered morally praiseworthy. And that condition is that she could have done otherwise. So if we suppose that Sarah donated to charity and that she could have gone for a walk instead or done something else with her money, perhaps purchased a new TV from Best Buy, then Sarah is morally responsible, morally praiseworthy for doing what she has done. So that's a positive case. Take a negative case. Take a case where Sarah tells a lie to a friend. And suppose that this produces much harm in her friend feels betrayed, etc., etc. According to the principle of alternate possibilities, Sarah is going to be morally responsible. She's going to be morally blameworthy. It's the negative case for her lie, for her telling the lie to her friend, right? Only if she could have done otherwise. So let's just suppose that she could have done otherwise. Then, according to the principle of alternate possibilities, Sarah is, all things being equal, morally blameworthy for having told the lie. So hopefully that puts us in a good position for understanding the principle that's in question, the principle that Alvarez and Frankfurt disagree on. Let's now turn to Alvarez and how she understands the principle. So Alvarez's paper can be found online pretty readily. The paper was published in the Australasian Journal of Philosophy, as I've noted, in 2009. And I'll be reading from page 63 in the essay. Just note that it's the third page of the essay if you were to print it up. The paper begins on page 61 in the journal presentation. So I'll turn to page 63. And here's what Alvarez says. I take it that when the principle is expressed by saying that a person is morally responsible for an action only if he could have done otherwise, those are her quotes. So she's examining the quoted expression here. What is meant is simply that the person is not morally responsible unless it was possible for him not to do what he did. She continues, that is, the principle does not, in addition, require that the agent could have performed some other action instead. So she's highlighting a potential ambiguity that could be present in interpreting this principle. And in particular, the ambiguity would be associated with the expression, he could have done otherwise. And here she continues, or to put the point differently, there are two ways in which someone who performs an action could do otherwise or act differently. One is by doing something else. The other is by simply not performing the original action. Sometimes we call those refrainings or omissions. Okay, I take the principle of alternate possibilities, to say that moral responsibility requires only the second kind of possibility, only the refraining, not the having to do some different kind of action altogether. The possibility, she continues, of not performing the original action. Okay, so if we consider the Sarah case, where Sarah tells the lie, so she performs the action of telling a lie, the principle of alternate possibility doesn't require that she have told her friend something honest instead, for example. All that the principle of alternate possibilities requires, in terms of its necessary condition, is that Sarah had the ability, guess what? Not to lie, had the ability to refrain from telling a lie in the case. That's it. Not that she also had to positively, as it were, say something honest, tell her friend the truth. Okay? So that's how Alvarez is understanding the principle of alternate possibilities. She takes that to be the most viable way of interpreting the principle. So we have her interpretation now on the table, her understanding on the table. Now, what we need to do in order to appreciate what Alvarez is going to say in response to Frankfurt is understand Frankfurt's argument. So I have videos on this if you're interested. Have a look if you'd like. If not, let me just go ahead and get to the bare bones of Frankfurt's argument. And the argument is developed in his 1969 essay, as many of you may know, Alternate Possibilities and Moral Responsibility. Now, Frankfurt's argumentative strategy in his 1969 piece is to develop a counterexample to the principle of alternate possibilities. And the counterexample involves finding a case where we have an agent who is morally responsible for what she does, or for what he does. He uses a he in his case, so I'll just follow him, even though he couldn't have done otherwise. Right? Intuitively, that'd be a way of challenging the necessary condition that's specified in the principle of alternate possibilities. So according to the principle of alternate possibilities, an agent is morally responsible only if he could have done otherwise. Frankfurt says, I can challenge that principle by devising a case, an intuitive case, where an agent's morally responsible even if he couldn't have done otherwise. So Frankfurt develops what are called the Jones cases. And he runs through a series of 4 of them. I'll just talk about the 4th one. Okay, this is supposed to be the case that he takes to be a decisive counterexample to the principle of alternate possibilities. So there's Jones 4. And Jones deliberates and decides to perform an action. And I'll fill in some detail here. Frankfurt doesn't give us an action, so I'll give us one. Let's suppose it's robbing a bank. So Jones 4 deliberates and decides to rob a bank, and he goes into the bank and he robs it. So he performs the action. So the relevant action under consideration is robbing the bank. And Jones does that. Jones robs the bank. Now, all things being equal, it looks like because Jones acted on the basis of his own decision-making, is morally responsible for what he does. But here's what Frankfurt claims in order to develop the idea that Jones 4 couldn't have done otherwise is to imagine a scenario in which, had Jones at the last minute decided not to rob the bank, there would have been this intervener. There would have been this, what we call a counterfactual intervener. It's called a counterfactual intervener because it's counter to fact. It doesn't actually happen, but it could have happened. It would have happened were Jones the last minute to have decided not to rob the bank. So had that happened, then this counterfactual intervener would have manipulated, would have caused Jones to rob the bank, perhaps by threat or perhaps by some kind of other sci-fi kind of means. Perhaps this counterfactual intervener had access to Jones' brain well enough to manipulate him, and well enough to manipulate his brain to form the decision to rob the bank had he at the last minute decided not to rob the bank, for example. So here, if this case is successful, we have an example where we have Jones 4, who's morally responsible for having robbed the bank because he did so on the basis of his own decision making. Okay, but he couldn't have done otherwise because were he to have decided not to rob the bank at the last minute, he would have been manipulated by this counterfactual intervener to rob the bank. Okay, so it looks like, according to Frankfurt anyways, like we have a counterexample to the principle of alternate possibilities. Now, big picture, Maria Alvarez thinks that this counterexample, it fails. And moreover, any counterexample, any other case that's like this attempted counterexample to the principle of alternate possibilities is going to fail as well. Why? Because lurking beneath the surface, once we do some digging, do some careful thinking, is an important conceptual confusion, one that Frankfurt didn't anticipate. So what I'll do is I'll stop here, conclude part 1 of my video series on Alvarez's 2009 piece, and pick up in my next video with part 2, where I lay out exactly how it is that Alvarez challenges Frankfurt with this idea of a conceptual confusion that he's committed to. So I thank you all for watching. If you have any questions, comment below. Let me know what you're thinking about the Alvarez. If any clarifications are needed, email me, jedickin@syr.edu, #HCW, shout out.